So I'm fairly excited for the Switch 2, how about you? And it's not so much for the hardware, I'm sure they can do cool things with it, but mostly for the games. Unlike Sony or Microsoft, Nintendo actually focuses on putting out games for their new consoles. I guess that's a bit of a lost art since the PS5 has nothing to play, and we've already seen a new Mario Kart is going to be there, but that got me thinking, what else could we expect? Well, it's actually kind of obvious when you go back and look at their previous work, so that just about anybody could come up with a fairly accurate outline of the timing for the Switch 2 releases. So let's go through and see which Nintendo series would most likely put out a game at the system's launch, sometime within the first year, sometime more between 2 and 3 years, and which ones we'll not be seeing for more like 5 years. As we said, Mario Kart is a launch title, or presumably so. You gotta have some kind of big name to launch your shiny new toy. Last time it was Zelda, the GameCube launched with Luigi's Mansion, and so on. But what other titles could stand hand in hand with Mario Kart on the Switch 2? Honestly, it's not too many, since there are only ever a handful of launch titles, so I think some of the obvious choices could be cross-gen releases like, say, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. We know that this game is coming to Switch this year, but who's to say that it can't be on Switch 2 as well? They did use Dread to push the OLED model after all, but then again Switch 2 is backwards compatible, so they really don't need to have a dedicated version on both systems, unless one of them just ran so much better that it was worth the upgrade. But I also think that it would be possible to see Pokémon Legends ZA as another cross-gen launch title as well. The last Legends game came out at an odd time, so it may be that they waited an extra year not for polish, but to coincide the premiere of this highly anticipated game with the highly anticipated system as well. Again, it is confirmed to be coming to the base Switch as well, but it would be a pretty big win to launch a home console with a Pokémon game, since that's literally never even been possible before. Another possibility for launch titles are the console gimmick games, like your Wii Sports and all that, except that last time we had 1-2 Switch, and as much as that included a bunch of the tricks that the Switch could do, it wasn't really a good game, and the sequel seemed even worse. Besides, that sequel only came out in 2023, so that seems a bit soon to try out another one. However, I wouldn't put it past them to do so. Now, I think an even better way to show off the gimmicks could be a new ARMS game. Last time ARMS was within the first year, but by then Mario Kart and Breath of the Wild had already captured everyone, so ARMS didn't really have the reach that they were expecting. However, if the new ARMS were on day one with some new features specific to the new breed of Joy-Con showed off in a cinematic trailer, then it might just be enough to entice people to try it out before the games that they were really wanting to play are released. And then it could capture a whole bunch of new ARMS fans and actually turn it into a real franchise. But my final proposal for a launch window game could be a sequel to Astral Chain. This game came out of nowhere and was quietly enjoyed by many Switch owners, easily selling more units than both Princess Peach Showtime or Bayonetta 3, so it has some potential to surpass other series Nintendo seems to value higher. However, if you look at the calendar, Astral Chain came out in 2019. That's nearly 6 years old at this point, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if we happen to finally see this property show up again as a day one offering for the Switch 2, once again possibly propping up a new lucrative franchise for future installments. But missing out on being a launch title isn't the worst thing, because even if they're within the first year, you'll still have a lot of early adopters. So what can we expect for the first full year of the Switch 2? Well, it helps to look back at the series that have spent the longest time since we've revisited them, like say Animal Crossing. It still seems like yesterday, but New Horizons came out in 2020. That means it'll have been 5 years since the last game, and with it continually being the number 2 selling Switch game, I would think they would be eager to recapture that magic. So a big name series like Animal Crossing seems like an easy choice for them to prioritize within the first year. That kind of mindset also works for Ring Fit, because the new Joy-Cons won't work with the accessories for the current game. So with the first one being a smash success, why not offer up a new way for people to work out, especially since the first one came out in 2019, so I think nearly 7 years is long enough to cook up for a new entry for this surprise hit. Now, another key in looking at past figures is noticing patterns, such as the fact that certain game series like to come out once a year or every other year, like the Kirby series. Kirby has had a game in 2018, 2019, 2 in 2022, and in 2023, so the pink puffball really likes to pump out content for people to play. And with the Switch 2 being about 2 years since the last Kirby outing, what better time would there be for him to come right back at ya? It wouldn't even have to be much, it could just be like another Dream Buffet or something, but I am fairly confident in saying that we'll see Kirby's face rather soon on the system. Obviously, the Pokemon series does this kind of model too, mostly being an annual event as of late, and I could see them having a new generation like what they did after the last Legends game, but it's far more likely that Gen 10 will show up in 2026 for the 30th anniversary of the franchise. However, some kind of Pokemon spin-off game within the first year is absolutely possible. What many people may not have thought about is the Warriors series of games. The Switch put both Fire Emblem Warriors and Hyrule Warriors in for the early years, and then they saw updates to both of them with Three Hopes and Age of Calamity, pretty evenly spaced across the system's life, so I would not be surprised one bit if we saw one of those sometime within the first year of the Switch 2. Speaking of, I wouldn't count out a regular Fire Emblem game either, but that's not quite as likely for the 1-year mark since Engage only came out in 2023. But before we leave, I wanted to talk about the biggest names that I think could come up in the first year of the console: Yoshi and Mario. Mostly Mario, since I don't really understand how Yoshi got his own series in the first place, but if you look, it has been since March of 2019 that Yoshi's Crafted World came out. So what's our dinosaur friend been doing for the last 7 years at that point in 2026? Hopefully crafting up a new game, especially since the Yoshi games are never really the most difficult around, so I think he's got a real shot at making it in the crucial starting window. However, I think it's clear that the best way they could possibly cap off the year is to close with a new 3D Mario game. They obviously know that, since that's exactly what they did with the first Switch in 2017 when Odyssey came out. However, we've not seen a 3D Mario since then. No, Bowser's Fury doesn't count, that was a glorified tech demo, but given that display, there has been years at this point to tinker around with the open world concept and get something going for this new console. And I see no reason why the Switch 2 can't have Mario Kart and 3D Mario when the first Switch thrived on that same setup. It's not a guarantee, but it just feels wrong not to expect the plumber to show his mustache sometime within year 1. So then that takes us to the moderate schedule of games coming to the system about 2 to 3 years after it comes to market. For instance, seeing as how we just got a Luigi's Mansion game within the past year, I don't foresee us getting another one soon. Granted, it was a remake of Dark Moon, but that still pushes the timeline quite a bit, so that our last Luigi's Mansion game wasn't 3 back in 2019, so we can wait a little bit longer before we get a brand new entry into this expanding franchise. And that goes like triple for Donkey Kong. If they were anywhere close to a new DK game, they probably wouldn't have ported over a Wii game at the start of 2025. So this is clearly a way to make fans forget that the last new Donkey Kong game is over a decade old at this point. Even though we did see another game super recently, they didn't really have to do as much to create it from the ground up, which means that they still could have had some time to work on a new product, so I think we're safe to call it at least 2 to 3 years out from now. This mentality covers Mario Party as well. They really like to keep putting out Mario Party games, that's for sure, but we just got like the biggest and best Mario Party ever. Everyone agrees, so why would they not let it breathe a little? The answer is they would, because they seem to be on a 3-year development cycle for Mario Parties these days, and that schedule would put it right in the middle of the moderate range. Now, I think if they are planning to do more Mario sports titles, the first one would likely fall into this time frame as well. As for what that title is, I have no idea. The Switch gave us tennis, golf, and soccer, so I doubt any of those will be repeated so soon. So maybe basketball, or baseball, or maybe a new sport altogether. But chances are good that we will see Mario and friends suit up for some kind of fun on the field after the first year. So for a few of the smaller series, I think a new WarioWare is likely. They're not super intense games really, and we've seen a couple of them over the Switch's lifespan, so with the latest one being in 2023, I think 2 to 3 years from now is more than enough time to create a collection of minigames that can utilize the newer hardware. I also think it's possible for this to be the case for a new Famicom Detective Club. This was a series that absolutely nobody saw returning, but they successfully reminded everyone they existed through the modern remakes in 2021, but then they released a new game in the franchise with a brand new story with Emio the Smiling Man. So if it takes 2 or 3 years to make one of those, then 2 or 3 years from now honestly gives them even more time to make a quality product. I would like to say this could work for Advance Wars too, because the only reason we got it in 2023 was because it was delayed due to unforeseen circumstances. And unless they've decided to scrap the series altogether, I could see a new game in the vein of Famicom Detective Club happening 5 or 6 years after the remake was finished. Although with the sales being kind of poor, I wouldn't put it past them to shelve this one for a while. And before the big guns, I would like to point out that the Mario and Rabbids games have so far been 5 years between entries, meaning that 2027 would have us primed for a third one. If they wanted to make another one, that is. But even a 2028 release would put it in the moderate camp, so it's pretty good to predict it here. Now, it's possible that we could see another Splatoon game in this window as well. It definitely won't be soon because Splatoon 3 only came out in 2022, which was 5 years after the second one. Now, maybe there could be some kind of Splatoon spin-off game sooner than that, but as for a full-blown 4, I wouldn't expect it any sooner than year 2 of the console. Besides, that gives them plenty of time to make the online connections actually work properly before they launch a heavily multiplayer game. So for the final two in the middle category, I'll start with 2D Metroid. Obviously Prime 4 is happening much earlier, but we went a pretty long time without a side-scrolling Metroid game until Dread in 2021, even though that's the core version of the gameplay that Metroid was built on. Of course they had Dread in mind for years at that point, but 6 or 7 years would give them a good head start on a new side-scrolling adventure for Samus, since Metroid has once again cemented itself as a Nintendo property worthy of notice. And another one of those would be Xenoblade Chronicles, which I think is reasonable to see pop up in the medium of the Switch 2's lifecycle. After all, it was only 5 years in between Xenoblade 2 and 3, and that was with DLC and a completely updated version of the first game. So if they can do all of that in half of a decade's worth of years, then surely they can take advantage of the new system's power by making a bigger, better version within at least 6 of them. Because I don't think porting Xenoblade X takes up that much space at the company. Xenoblade might still be a mid-sized series for Nintendo, but since they acquired Monolith Soft, I think it's safe to say they expect big returns on it as well. So then, what are the super far-out Nintendo properties that we're not likely to see until a good 5 years into the Switch 2 existing? Closer to the next home console releasing than the start of this one? Well, I think Zelda is an obvious answer. Tears of the Kingdom only came out in 2023, so it took almost the entirety of the Switch to get a sequel, meaning that another one so soon is not incredibly likely for a 3D Zelda. And honestly, I don't see a 2D Zelda making a new game until then either, since Echoes of Wisdom is only like 6 months older than the Switch 2. Now, they could definitely fill in that time with remakes or ports of older games, as Zelda tends to do, but I don't think a new game of any kind would be plausible until we're more than halfway through the new console's life. I also think Paper Mario is a given since they remade the Thousand Year Door from the ground up in 2024, less than a year before the console is out. I'm not confident that we'll see them try a new one until a good 5 years from launch, especially since Origami King was 4 years after the first Switch was on shelves. The same goes for Mario and Luigi too, actually. If they were going to make another one, it would have to be a ways off, since Brothership was the last big game to come out for Nintendo in 2024 after the Thousand Year Door, so it would probably have to show up after the new Paper Mario then too. Just any Mario RPG really, and I think it's safe to include 2D Mario in this range as well. Super Mario Wonder was a really nice surprise, but it was quite late compared to other staples on the Switch. The port from the Wii U version was nearly 5 years earlier, so if they're going to give it the same level of detail that Wonder had, it'll be a good long while before 2D Mario graces the Switch too. But that's fine because we will have plenty of other things lined up already to fill that void. But lastly, I wanted to assure everyone that we will have a lot of time before we ever see a new Pikmin on Switch 2. That's not a slight against the Pikmin series because it's become a bit of a powerhouse on the Switch, but that's the problem. You can play every single Pikmin game on the original Switch. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I guess they could port over Hey Pikmin from the 3DS or something, but it would make zero sense to bring over any past Pikmin game because they're all compatible with the new system already. So all we can do is make a new one, I guess. And seeing as how it took around a decade of waiting for Pikmin 4, we would be lucky to see these little plant guys on the Switch 2 at all, if we're being honest. So I do fully see Pikmin as a solid second-tier property for Nintendo at this point, but their quality control is so strenuous that it could be another 10 years before we see the series actually continue. But luckily, we won't have to wait that long for everything, and I feel fairly confident that this is a good approximation of what we can expect the Switch 2's game library to look like going forward. But what do you think is the most likely outline for the next Nintendo console? Let me know where you think a Super Smash Bros. Might line up. And let me know what franchise you're most excited for and why it's probably not Star Fox.